Hello, welcome to another video of Attempted Living, where we ask and answer the hard questions in life. Today we're going to talk about what is suicide. I feel like this is a topic that a lot of people are afraid of, and because suicide is a scary thing, a lot of people are uncomfortable by it. And so I hope by the end of this video you can become more comfortable with the concept of suicide and have some knowledge that will protect you from suicide and help you protect people you care about and love from suicide as well as understand more about what suicide is. So I'll start by defining the basic definition of suicide is someone who kills themselves, ending their life by their own means, by their own hand, intentionally. Not an unintentional death, that's an accidental death. Intentionally killing oneself is suicide. So this, you can think about, so when you're trying to understand suicide, one of the frameworks that you can use to understand it and therefore make it less scary, one of the ways to overcome fear is to understand your fear. So if you're afraid of suicide, understanding it will help lessen your fear. Suicide is when at some point, someone has to decide that they want to kill themselves, and then they have to actually go do that. So, suicide is the act of successfully killing themselves. Deciding to kill themselves makes that person suicidal. Considering the thought, considering killing themselves, but not making that decision is still under the category of suicidal. So when you're considering suicide as a potential option, you have become suicidal. Someone who is not suicidal would think about killing themselves, but definitely choose not to. When that choice becomes less definite, then you're creeping closer to suicidal. If your odds of killing yourself are 0 out of 10, then you're not suicidal. As they approach 7 out of 10, then you're increasingly suicidal. So that kind of describes what suicide is, and from a definition standpoint. However, obviously, there's much more to what suicide is, and I will get into that next. So a lot of something to understand about suicide is that a lot of factors can a common word and concept associated with suicide is depression. And depression is another word and concept that a lot of people are afraid of, don't really understand. And so to help you be less afraid of it, we will understand it better. So what is depression? So depression is an extreme case of, I want to say sadness, but also apathy. So normal healthy emotions. So if you imagine in the same way that there is a healthy amount of sugar you should eat each day, there's a healthy amount of candy, there's a healthy amount of anything that you should be doing each day. When you exceed that amount, when you exceed the healthy range, then you become less healthy. So it's the same way with emotions. So if you wake up and you're happy half the time and sad half the time, mathematically you've balanced out to be neutral for the day. However, if there's an imbalance, like each day you're unhappy for 1 hour more than you are happy, then overall this unhappiness will accumulate. And over the course of a year, you're going to feel the burden, the emotional baggage, the stress, the sadness of a year's worth of sadness will be on your chest when you wake up on that day after 1 year of accumulating sadness for a year. And so when the imbalance gets past a healthy point, it becomes unhealthy. So that's the difference between sadness and depression. Sadness is if it's within a healthy range, right? Like you could eat candy a couple times and still be healthy. But if you ate candy only every day for several weeks, you would be in serious physical danger, because that's extremely unhealthy. So in that same way, emotionally, if you feel sadness now and then happiness later, then you're in the healthy range of emotions. That's okay. Once you start feeling consistent sadness over long periods of time that weighs down on you and consumes your energy and being, then you're entering towards depression. Depression and apathy kind of go together. It's when your emotions are broken in some sense. In the same way that you can imagine there exists diabetes, which is your body's ability to regulate insulin failing as a result of too much sugar. There is something in your mind, body, spirit, heart, whatever, somewhere, something is regulating your emotions. And when you overwhelm it with sadness, you tip into depression. And depression is when you no longer can regulate or feel emotions anymore, because either you're full of emotions, so you can't, it's like if your mouth is full of candy, you can't taste the extra piece of candy that you're putting into your mouth because it's already full of candy. So sometimes people can't feel emotions because they're overwhelmed with emotions. Other times it's they've shut down. The emotions are so painful. So for example, if you were to have physical pain, one of your body's natural reactions to extreme physical pain is to numb the pain. To basically, there's a way for your body to send chemicals to your brain to make it feel like you don't have that pain at all. And that's numbing the pain. So the pain is there, but you're numb to it because that's your body's protection of your mind. And because if you felt the pain, it would overwhelm your mind and you wouldn't be able to focus on anything else. So sometimes apathy is a result of you being exposed to such a painful emotional pain that you numb yourself to all emotions as a way to keep your mind sane. So then when this happens, you're now no longer making decisions based on a healthy emotional mindset. And this is where things can get dangerous, because it's like when your liver stops working, does the rest of your body know how to behave to keep yourself alive while the liver's not working? In that same way, while your emotional regulator has been broken by too many emotions or an extremely severe and painful trauma emotion, does your mind still know how to operate? And for most people, they don't, because very few people get experience and practice managing their mind and managing their emotions in extreme conditions. And under those circumstances, it's very easy for someone to be swayed one way or another, or just spiral down the depression hole towards suicide. So suicide is one way of modeling these emotions. There are many ways to model these emotions, and everyone experiences them differently. one way that I'm modeling these emotions is that the pathway from someone healthy is to go through either an extremely traumatic and sad event in their life to plummet them through trauma into depression and sadness, or just accumulated sadness over time, consistently building on their everyday life, and then they head towards depression. So once they're in depression, they're still in the situation that put them there. So whether it's the trauma that put them there, or the whatever's going on in their life that puts them in depression, as long as this exists or this exists, they're going to stay in depression. And so this is what leads to people feeling trapped, because the only way that they can get out of depression is if they can either overcome the trauma or significant event that is keeping them in depression, or figure out what is that consistent sadness in their life, resolve that so that they can move back to a healthy life. This kind of stuff is what self-reflection is really good for, as well as what therapy with a good therapist is really good for. And if a person does not get any help in solving their problem of their emotional problem that is driving them to depression, if they don't get help with their emotional problem that drives them to depression, they will feel like they will never get out of depression. And after a long period of time in depression, just like after a long period of time in sadness, they become depressed, after a long period of time in depression, they can become suicidal. And so this is a progression of someone from healthy state to less healthy, they're sad, to much less healthy, they're depressed, to critically unhealthy, they're suicidal. In the same way that someone who smokes can, be healthy, then have damaged lungs, then have seriously damaged lungs, and then be dying from lung cancer. Or someone who eats really unhealthy every day and then gets diagnosed with heart problems and then has to have serious surgery to address the heart problems, and then finally they have a heart attack and they are in the ICU or they die, right? So in the same way that there are physical diseases which are based on severity of a single metric, be it diabetes, like sugar content of your food, or heart disease, which is the blood pressure, and also the diet that you eat. Like in the same way that there are physical manifestations of different levels of health, emotional manifestations of emotional health will lead you from healthy to sad to depressed to suicidal. So, I hope that helps you understand what suicide is. It is an accumulation of a lot of events. Either it's an accumulation of a sudden event which plummets them to depression, and if the person is particularly weak, or if the event is particularly damaging, it could skip depression straight to suicide. That is possible too. The way that I like to model this is using computer games. So if you would imagine that your emotional regulator has health points. It's like your emotional regulator has 10 points of emotional regulating power. And if it suffers damage, like if in the same way that if you punch a wall too hard, then depending on how hard you punch the wall, your bones will break or they won't break. So let's say that the emotional regulator takes like 4 points of damage down to 6. Then you feel sad. If it takes 8 points of damage down to 2, then you feel depressed. And if it takes 10 points of damage down to 0, then you're suicidal and you're thinking about ending it because you just can't tolerate the pain anymore. You can't tolerate the emotions and you just want to escape. And so that's what suicide is. Suicide is a solution to a state of being when you have no idea how to get out of that state of being, and you're not in the right state of mind to figure out how to get out of that state of being. As a result, you're trapped in that state of being, and you want to get out of it, and you might think of suicide as a way out. So the key point here is that I hope you realize that suicide is not the way out of these problems. There is something that triggered someone's health to deteriorate, right? Something happened that caused that emotional regulator to go from 10 points of health to 0 points of health. And so the solution is not to then follow through with suicide. Instead, the solution is to figure out a way to heal that emotional regulator back up to 1 point, to 2 points, to 5 points, to 8 points, to 10 points. There are ways to heal someone's emotional regulator. And this is how you can save someone, bring someone back from the depths of suicide, the depths of depression, the depths of sadness. And I guess I can talk about tools for doing that in this video. I was thinking about making that a separate video, but this is a good lead-in. Okay, so tools for helping people with suicide, depression, and sadness. Okay, so there's an important point, which is that if someone is sad, they're still healthy. Their emotional regulator is still working, which means that if you suggest fun activities for them to do, you can cheer them up and make them happy again. This works if they are in the healthy range of sad. If they have moved into depression, then what happens is if you bring them out and get them to do something fun and happy, it will temporarily add units of happiness to their mind, to their life, but it may not do anything to their depression because you're not addressing the problem at its source. Depression, remember, is someone was healthy, something happened, and then this something is putting them into depression. So if you want to help them get out of depression, if you notice your friend is sad for weeks and weeks and weeks, or they're bitter, or they're resentful, or they're exhibiting any kinds of negative emotions consistently over a long period of time, that is because there must be something consistently in their life that is putting them down. And so, of course, so the ideal case is you talk with them using empathetic language to figure out, to get them to trust you, to get them to open up to you, and then to get them to tell you what it is that is keeping them in depression. What event? What is keeping them sad? Because there is something that's keeping them sad. And here's another important part. Most of them don't know the answer to this themselves, because most people are not very self-aware emotionally. Most people, which is why they all they know is they're depressed and they're trapped, which is why they start falling into suicide, because they don't know how to get out and they feel helpless. So it's very, very important for you, if you want to defend yourself against suicide, and if you want to help other people prevent them from falling into suicide from depression, it's important to learn the skill of how to self-diagnose what it is that is causing the depression so that you can address the core issue, remove it, so that they can move back to a healthy life. That definitely will be in a separate video. I will make that video on how to dig out and solve emotional problems. However, the key point is that if someone is behaving in a depressed or suicidal manner, recognize that that's the kind of help they need. They need someone to talk to open up to, and address the core issue that is keeping them down. That core issue that keeps them in depression is the same core issue that's going to keep them in a suicidal state. It's just much harder to reach someone in a suicidal state than it is to reach someone in a depressive state. But both are doable. Key points are that you listen more than you speak. You create a safe space for them to talk without being judged, without being criticized. You want to build up their self-confidence, the self-worth, acknowledge their existence, acknowledge what they say, validate and support what they say, validate and support their point of view, validate and support their emotions, whatever they express, accept that that is what they feel, and then essentially follow the steps of a previous video I made on conversation tactics. Okay, great. So in recap, suicide is the decision to kill themselves, as well as suicide starts with a decision, and then it progresses to actually doing the action and killing themselves. Depression is a stage before this, which is characterized by really, really negative emotions and feeling trapped and not being able to get out of that emotional state of being, which is caused by some sort of event which took them from normal sadness, which is in the healthy range of emotional tolerance for human beings. Great. Please share your thoughts below, and please subscribe if you like these videos. Remember that there are more resources at attemptedliving.com. Thank you for watching.